If you were here last week, you know that we began a series, and we'll be continuing a series looking through the book of Job, an interesting text, very familiar to us. One of those books that seems to be easier to read than many in the Old Testament. Carries a narrative, keeps our attention to some measure, and seems like we can follow the plot and understand what's going on. And of course, Job has been that quintessential character, that stereotypical person who knows suffering. And so it's good for us to come and try to answer and tackle some of these great questions, the curiosity of why there is evil in the world. We live in an age where people feel entitled. They feel that they don't deserve any sort of encumbrance or any difficulty in their lives. That was even seen in our own vocabulary, our own whining and complaining this past week. God, in his sovereign design, gave us an ice storm last Sunday, and what did we do? Complain that God doesn't know it's spring. We don't deserve this kind of weather. Where's that sunshine? He owes us something other than what he decides to give us. That is the natural attitude of the age that we live in. We don't know what it looks like oftentimes to really, truly suffer. We suffer and whine at the simplest of things. I came across some tweets this week that kind of lent themselves to this kind of typical 21st century whining. Coffee machine at work is broken. It's anarchy. How am I supposed to work in these conditions? What is going on with us that we actually talk like this, and whether this is half serious or even remotely serious? Trusty earbuds broken and now have poor set of choices. Wireless earbuds, easy to lose, look weird. Wireless headphones, I'm no longer 20. Bluetooth earbuds with necklace, Wired earbuds, not exactly embracing change. Boy, we're living with really tough times, aren't we? The trusty earbuds are broken and I only have 4 ugly options. What am I going to do? Not having an iPhone for a day is like, or a day or two is, after having one for so long, is like losing an arm in war. I'm sure every vet who doesn't have a limb feels exactly the same way, don't they? You know, my wife and I don't have data on our phone. When I mention that to people, I get the same reaction every time. It begins with this look of complete sympathy, like I have just announced that I dropped my arm into the garbage disposal. And then it slowly turns and becomes this look of complete incredulous confusion. Like, how are you still alive? You don't have data on your phone? And then it evolves very quickly and it becomes, oh, you poor guy, you don't know how to use the internet. And suddenly it becomes sympathy. I mean, there is something strange that happens just because a person chooses to have a simple life and keep their life simple and their phone bill low. And I don't know what my point is, except that people think they can't live without something. Arrgh! My bechamel won't thicken. Yeah, that's cool. For those non-foodies, bechamel is just a white sauce. That's life on the hard edge of things. If your bechamel won't thicken, okay, maybe you didn't think that was important. Ugh, my phone isn't charging. Why is life such a challenge? We are whiny people, and we are people who feel entitled. When my wife and I got off the airplane just recently, we came home from our missions thing to Cancun and stood on the curb waiting for the bus to pick us up, to take us, the shuttle bus, to our parked car. And we waited a little longer than was expected. And some people who were standing with us began to whine very verbally, making very clear and plain that this is unjust, this is horrible. A bus would pull up, it's not for our place. How can you believe it? Everybody else is getting on the bus except us. They were chipping and nattering away. These people who probably just got off a plane, who stayed at a resort where they ate more meals in a week than they should possibly ever deserve, stood on the curb for more minutes than they thought they ever should, and when the bus finally arrived, they shoved and pushed and elbowed to the front because they deserved to be on first, left some of us off the bus and had to wait for the second bus, boo-hoo for us, another whole 2 minutes of waiting. And this was an injustice that needed to be set straight. And you should have heard the words that came to set that bus driver straight. This isn't right. We are a whiny people. We know nothing of wickedness and evil. We complain at the smallest, stupidest, most unbelievable injustices. If we don't get the weather we want, we think we deserve better. We have the right to say so. There's something intrinsically wrong with the people who don't submit to what's going on around them. So when we come to a person like Job, we have almost nothing to relate to. How could he possibly go through all this? This has to be a made-up story. This is what the Bible tells us took place historically to a man named Job. And if you were with us last week, you know that the tragedy, the suffering begins with all his externals. His business is torn away from him. His family is put to death with the exception of his beloved wife. Everything is gone from him. And his response, naked I came from my mother's womb, naked I shall return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. There's a man who understands his God, that God sovereignly rules and overrules every day of his life. And should there be an ice storm or no coffee in the pot, this is by God's design for me in this moment, and I do not complain. This man was blameless. We're very clearly told throughout Scripture, right at the start. It's made very plain to the readers over and over again that this man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned from evil. This is not sinless. This is talking about integrity. And this sets the stage so that we understand that everything that's happening to Job is not because of anything in his life. There are times when evil comes. There are times when wickedness arrives at your doorstep and there is no seemingly just cause. That's Job's scenario. So chapter 2 begins another scene. And if you notice the very first phrase, and again there was a day. Now I don't know if you were here last week, if you remember that little phrase, again there was a day, divides these first 2 chapters into little pictures, into little vignettes. We saw the first 3. Again there was a day, meaning everything has happened, some period of time has passed, we don't know how much, but unrelated to everything that happened, now this scene is taking place. That's what the author is doing by dividing this. Again, there was a day when the sons of God, this is referencing celestial beings, created beings, we would call them angels in some sense, all created things of God's, in another realm. God, the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. There's a lot of curiosity what's going on here. This is the same expression, the same scene that we had in chapter 1 repeated again. There's some curiosity how it is that a holy God could stand in the presence of Satan. We don't understand what the dynamic is. We don't see what's going on, but we begin to glean that there's some measure of subordination amongst God's celestial beings, his created beings, to come and report to him. And so there's something that's going on as they present themselves to him. Verse 2, the Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered to the Lord, and said, "From going to and fro on the earth and walking up and down on it." And again, we have that sense that this vagabond of a being that is subservient to God in every way, is not omniscient and all powerful and ever present. He has to move to and fro and leap from here to there. And he does, and he is about his business of causing havoc everywhere we go. And of course, 1 Peter 5:8, this familiar text. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. That's the principle that you see. I'm moving to and fro. I'm just doing what I do, trying to find some place to cause grief. 2 Timothy 2:26, if you pardon the ripping this out of its context, or at least out of a greater context, and just reading in the middle of a sentence, and they may come to their senses, that they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil. Here's our phrase: after being captured by him to do his will. You get the sense that there is a wickedness in this world that is setting traps, that is haphazardly moving here and there and wherever it may be, looking for those who would fall into those traps and be ensnared. This is the picture, of course, in Scripture, of our enemy. The Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" This is a fascinating concept, that at this moment, there seems to be some connection between the evil that Job is about to experience and God. Have you considered my servant Job? This is God's idea. There is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. Underlining again, Job's innocence in all of this. There is no reason. In fact, listen to this text. The end of verse 3. He still holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without reason. That is an interesting little phrase. Without reason. Now really, you don't care, I know, but the Hebrew word is hinam. Without reason, God had his reasons. We don't know what they were. Satan certainly had his reasons. He wanted to prove that God was being unjust by not allowing Job to have free will, and if you just give him a good life, he'll never really love you, and Job will definitely cave, and Satan had his reasons. God had his reasons. What do you mean without reason? What do you mean, God, that this was done without reason? The word without reason is exactly that. It can be translated, understood in various ways, without any cause or to no avail, in vain. You do it for no reason. There's no ultimate result from it, for there's no purpose. This is exactly what sometimes evil looks like from our perspective. There is no reason. Now, there are times when things happen and you can follow back and you say, well, because my husband is an ingrate or because my wife is a gossip, whatever the case, that caused this to happen and that to happen, and now we've got this trouble in our life and in our family or whatever. Sometimes you can recognize that there are consequences because of your own wicked choices or the choices of somebody else. You can see that evil has happened because of human free will. But there are times when it straight up seems like there is no justifiable reason. Why does evil happen without reason? Why do we experience times of hinam? There's no cause for it. Let me tell you a little incident in my own life. It has a happy ending, and it's a very trite, simple story. Nothing like what some of you have gone through in the hinam times of your life, that just facing evil for no reason. But one night, my wife and I were woken up. It was a summer night. The windows were wide open. And we woke up to a cacophony of noise that made no sense. It was a clang, it was a bang, it was a smash, it was a crash, it was a jangle, it was a jungle of noise that made no sense. We could not discern what it was. It lasted for about 10 to 12 seconds, and then there was silence. We bolted out of bed, needless to say, and ran to find out what had happened. We expected to find some tragic accident on the road, but everything was silent on our street. And then we looked out a little further and discovered, to our complete surprise, that our house had been hit by a truck. Pardon me. This was not just any truck. The man who was driving this truck was a barn painter. And the man who was driving this truck had his truck loaded with equipment. So when the truck came to a sudden jolt at our house, the contents at the back of the truck jettisoned from the truck and hit the house. The house was painted in every manner of color that you can possibly picture. At the last moment, he woke from his drunken stupor and realized what was going on and yanked the wheel. And with great force, the truck managed to, rather than drive into our house, he scraped along the side of the front of our house, driving over all of our bushes and whatever, sheared off the back of his pickup truck, his, what you call that, I can't remember, lift, tailgate, thank you. Sheared off the tailgate, everything left the truck, scraped along the front of the house, and we discovered by morning that there was junk and stuff strewn everywhere. It was quite an event. Neighbors came around, people began to take pictures. What in the wide world happened? There was stuff that was stuff on top of stuff. Tools and clothes and ladders and every possible combination of color of paint had been chosen to be opened up on the lawn. It became an actual toxic zone. We had to have government officials come in and tell us what soil to dig up, and became quite an interesting turn of events. It seemed to have happened for no reason. The best part, if they can say there was a best part, was that one of the cans of paint that popped open that filled up the back of the bed of his truck just drizzled paint out the back of the truck. It went across the lawn. You can maybe see it here. It went down the driveway. He hit the ditch there and lost a few more items off the back of his truck. And all the police had to do was follow the drizzle down the road, around the corner, down the street, and straight to the driveway. Unfortunately, if you can believe this, and this is an aside because I'm making this story longer than it needs to be, the man made it home, told his wife to quickly phone the police and tell them that their truck had been stolen, and returned to their driveway. The police told us there is no law against lying, and they were not going to try and pursue that, so the man got away with this scot-free. So there was no justice. Of course, the insurance covered all of this and blah-de-blah, blah-de-blah. Here's my point. Just stay with me, okay? I know this is a silly story. You've got tragic things, and here I'm giving some trite little silliness for no apparent reason. But this is why I'm telling you this, because this story had a happy ending, but only by the grace of God. The police told us that this man was probably traveling at least 100 kilometers an hour. They knew this by the ditches that had been, the gullies that had been put into the soil, the fact that he had to get through the ditch and what speed it would have had to be to get the vehicle to go up through the ditch that was in front of our house, and the way that the marks were, that the wheels turned so sharply. He should have hit this corner of the house. He should have driven straight into the house at this point. My son was sleeping on the other side of this corner. It was brick, drywall, insulation that was the distance between him and the headlights of a 100-kilometer-an-hour truck that should have come in the house, and the police said would have most definitely killed him. We came within a hair of losing a child because a foolish man decided to drink himself stupid, get into a vehicle, and drive himself home. What would we have said should this have had a tragic ending? Hinnom. There would have been no justifiable cause for someone to be that stupid and ignorant to how safe is it when you tuck your child to bed in his own bed, and then you have a story that he got killed by a drunk driver in his own bed? That wasn't how the story ended. But these are the Hinnom moments of life. What is the reason for that? Why do things happen that have no cause outside of the sovereign choice of God? Why? These are the moments that leave us wondering, questioning, and they push us against our understanding of God. This is where your theology of God will come to the fore. You will decide what God is like in these moments. Your faith will be tested to its absolute limit when these moments happen to you. And some of you have had them, and some of you know what I mean. Satan answered the Lord, verse 4, skin for skin. It's an interesting expression. Much ink has been spilt to try and explain that little proverb. It's explained in the next text, the next phrase. All that a man has, he will give for his life. It's a trade of something equal for skin. Of course, Job, what he's saying is, of course Job is praising you. He's alive. He saw that as a fair trade. He saw his family and his business as indispensable. He was willing to give them all up. Anybody will claim anything to save his own life. You go into a hostage situation, and what do you hear? Don't kill me, don't kill me. Here are my keys. Take my wallet. I'll give you anything. That's what the devil's saying. Job is not for real. He hasn't really been tested. He's only been tested like anybody would have reacted anywhere in the world. Skin for skin. Anybody would have said what Job said. So God says, remember what Job said. Naked I came from my mother's womb. Naked I shall return. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Satan is saying that Job's motivation for remaining loyal to God was Job's desire to live and not to die. But if you really test him, you'll really find out what he's made of. Do you ever wonder why sometimes the burner seems to get hotter on the back burner? Sometimes your life is going along great and we have this expression. Why do we have this expression in English? Out of the frying pan, into the fire. Why? Because that is exactly what it seems like sometimes. The frying pan is hot enough. And what happens? It goes from bad to worse. Why? I don't know. All I know is that there is a God who sovereignly overrules evil. God says to Satan, stretch out your hand and touch his bone and his flesh. Satan says this accuses this to God. Stretch out your hand, touch his bone and his flesh, and he'll curse you to your face. This expression, bone and flesh, this is ancient. You don't really care, I know, but it's believed that your bones was the place where your illness was. Whatever illness you had, it's in your bones, it's in your being, it's in your core. Your flesh was your outward thing. Don't give him a paper cut. Get it right to his bones. Whatever you do, you've got to touch him right to the core of his being. Give it to him good, and you will see that this man will crumble. So, we discover what we've always known, that God overrules evil. This is a constant theme throughout Scripture, and we must always remember this. Good and evil are not equal entities that are battling against each other. God rules supreme. Satan is on a leash. He is only allowed to do what God allows to do. Our mystery in our minds is, why would God allow that to happen? I'll just remind you, as I try to do my best to answer this, I'll just say this and interrupt my later thoughts. God is never under any obligation to tell us why he does anything. It's one of the privileges of being God. You get to do whatever you want. You're always right when you do it, and you never have to explain yourself, even when the people whine and think they deserve to know. Just a heads up. That's what happens when you're God. You may never understand the hidden moments. All we know is that God rules and overrules evil. And the only reason this happens is because Satan was given permission by God. And then we have a very interesting little vignette, another change. Every change so far has come with the phrase, and there came a day. Scene 5. So Satan went out. And instantaneously you see the haste, the excitement, the enthusiasm, the glee, the instantaneous response that Satan has the moment permission is given. He went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Not to get too technical here this morning, but that is a good expression, a good translation. Many of our English Bibles have the word boils. There's nothing wrong with that translation, but it isn't actually the Hebrew word boils. It's actually an inflammation, an erupting sore. We technically don't know 100% accuracy what the sore was. We think it is entirely an illogical guess that it was boils. But just so you understand that, it might well have been that, but we don't 100% know. The text says, as it's translated here very woodenly, loathsome sores. But that is the least of his problems. If you read the book of Job, you know that this is not all that Job faced. Job 2 verse 7, it's loathsome sores. Job 2 verse 12, we find out that whatever's happened to him, he is actually unrecognizable to his friends. Whether that's hair loss, weight loss, whatever's going on, you can't even tell who this man is anymore. Job 7, he talks about the fact that he has insomnia, that he's seeing things. He's in delirium, probably because of perhaps also a high fever. We told also in Job 7 that his sores are infected with worms. We're told in Job 16 that his face is red with weeping. We're told in Job 19 that he is emaciated. We're told in Job 30 that he is suffering from nausea and diarrhea, that there's some internal gastronomical thing going on there. In verse 30, we're told that his skin is turning black and falling off. We're told in chapter 30 that he has a fever. We're told that his breath is putrid. We're told that his teeth are falling out. The boils, if you want to call that, are the least of this man's worries. Whatever is going on in this man is absolutely to the nth degree. He believed he was dying. Everybody thought he was dying. He was so sure he was dying, he took himself out to the garbage pit we're about to see. This man had something that we do not know what it was. In fact, I read in a commentary this week, the author of the commentary wrote to a doctor friend of his to outline the symptoms of Job, and this was the letter back from this doctor. To attempt to diagnose the specific disease that afflicted Job on the basis of the symptoms that are given in the scriptures would appear to be an impossible task. In the serious afflicted patient, the physician may discover not one disease active, but several. This could have been the cause in Job's situation. It could have been the case, in Job's situation. Whatever the case, whatever the situation, we don't know fully what Job was afflicted with, and there's some charm in this. Just as like saying he's from the land of Uz, which is a nebulous place. We don't know where that is. We don't know what he was afflicted with. Well, now you have an opportunity to say, well, I have this. Well, guess what? Lay your life on the template of Job, and it fits. Whatever you're going through, I promise you, he's also experienced it. You cannot say, well, my situation is different. I need a different answer than Job. No, it's in here. He had what you have. He suffered what we suffered for the purposes of having an example for us to understand why evil exists. How does it work? Why does it happen? Where is this coming from? Job explains it to us. Verse 8, this is another response of Job's malady. If this isn't a picturesque scene, he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself, and he sat in the ashes. That's the garbage dump. This man believed that he was dying, and so he didn't know if he was contagious. His reaction was to just take himself to the curb. And then he has this piece of, that's just, you don't even want to think of why he's doing that. Is this an itch? I'll tell you, I don't know, you don't need my personal issues, but I have an inner ear thing that happens quite frequently. I have problems and constantly since many years ago, and I have an itch that happens in my head that I have this hunger to find a piece of barbed wire and thread it through and just give that a good, to me that is the perfect solution. I think if you did that it would be called mental floss. Is that what's going on with Job? He would rather lacerate himself, that is comfort over the incessant pain and itching that's happening. This man was in serious, dire straits. The picture is clear. It's so beyond our scope we can hardly even imagine what it's like to be experiencing these things. And some of you have. This man was dying. And it leaves us with asking questions. Questions. Is God good, but unable to stop evil? Is evil just out of control and God just can't do anything about it? Or is God actually not good and he's unwilling to stop evil? When you're pushed to the limits with evil in your life, your theology gets tested, and I'll tell you, you'll come out on either side of this. But there is a third option. Is God not good and unable to stop evil? Certainly this is a very, very popular position to take. I don't know if you're familiar with Harold Kushner. Rabbi Kushner, he's known as. He wrote a book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, a worldwide bestseller. His solution in responding to evil was to explain God's limitations. I believe in God, he says, but I do not believe in the same things about him that I did years ago when I was growing up or when I was a theological student. I recognize his limitations. He is limited in what he can do by laws of nature and by the evolution of human nature and human moral freedom. I no longer hold God responsible for illnesses, accidents, and natural disasters, because I realize that I gain little and lose so much when I blame God for those things. I can worship a God who hates suffering but cannot eliminate it more easily than I can worship a God who chooses to make children suffer and die for whatever exalted reason. And that's what happens. You get pushed to the edge of a Hannum experience, an evil that makes no sense, that has no answers, and you want to let God off the hook. You want to make an excuse. God can't help it. He's doing the best he can. He's a busy man. You can't expect him to keep a hold of everything. And when you drive home and get out of the driveway today and turn onto Taylor Road, you might be driving home in one of those zones where God isn't able to watch over everything. You might be just walking along the street and you might enter one of those pockets where God just can't keep control. I mean, he is doing his best, but lay off him. It's not his fault when something evil happens. Let me ask you something. Does that sound like the God of the Bible? Not even close. And if you were even going to begin to nod your head, then you're in the wrong church. You haven't even begun to read this Bible with half an eye open. There is something omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing about our God. And evil is not getting the upper hand. So if that's not the case, then is it just that God is not good and he doesn't want to stop evil? Well, you know, there is another answer. And Job's wife chooses one of these two positions. Such a human reaction. You know, we come down on Job's wife so quickly. We rail against this woman like she was horrible for what she said and how she reacted to Job. Job, his wife, verse 9, his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die." Just let's remember that this woman also lost her husband's business. She was about to lose her position and station in life. If her husband passed away, a woman in the ancient Near East with no children would be in a most destitute state. She also had lost 10 children. This woman was also going through this and grieving together with Job. She was not afflicted physically, but she had everything happening to him emotionally that he did. And her response was to just get it over with, Job. Clearly, you're so sick you're going to die. Everybody believed he was going to die. So why not just get it done? Why sit there and suffer? Let God kill you. And the temptation from her came to Job to turn his back on the sovereignty of God and to turn his back on everything he knew about a God who controls evil even when evil seems to come for no reason. Why? We don't know. We will never know. And this is the challenge of the church in regards to what we call the problem of evil. There is no full answer. It is always in the mind of God. The reasons for it are in the heart of God. But here is what we know. That God holds us in his hand. That he promises never to let his people go. That he is a God of love, compassion, and care. That in the midst of our suffering that he has allowed, he has his purposes. And like Job, we are called to submit to a God who knows better than our whiny hearts ever will. Verse 10, he said to her, "You speak of as one of the foolish women would speak." This is not foolish intellectually. This is foolish spiritually. You're talking like somebody who doesn't know God, who says that God's less than he is. You say that he's incapable of stopping evil. You're talking foolishness. That can't be how God is. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? There's a question you don't have an answer for. The only answer is, I guess so. What else can you say? How can you say, thank you, God, for giving me a beautiful day of sunshine, but you had no right to give us an ice storm last week when we wanted another beautiful day of sunshine? Should we say thank you for one and complain about the other? We admit that he gave us this. What do we say? He didn't give us that? He gives it all. Do we complain? We accept what God has given us. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you run around and click your heels. Have you read chapter 3 of Job? Do you find out where Job goes emotionally in this state? I'm not saying this is a simple thing. I'm saying this is theologically where our hearts need to land and rest. There's an ancient story. It comes from pagan roots, Taoism and Buddhism, and it's well known, and you probably know this little tale. It has no real purpose to it, except to point out a curious fact in regards to evil. The story goes that once upon a time, there was a man who was a farmer. He had a horse. The horse was the means of livelihood, and his horse ran away. His neighbor comes over and says, wow, what bad luck, your horse ran away. The man says, what do I know about good luck or bad luck? The next day, his horse returns back to his house, and it brings 2 wild horses with it. The neighbor comes over to him and says, wow, what good luck. Your horse ran away and came back now with 3. You now have 3 horses. You're the richest man in our neighborhood. The man says, good luck, bad luck, what do I know about it? The son is now out in the yard training one of these wild horses for work. And in the midst of the training, the wild horse kicks his son and he breaks both of his legs severely. The neighbor comes over and says, wow, what bad luck. One of the horses has damaged your son, your work hand, and now you have no help on the farm. The man says, good luck, bad luck, what do I know about these things? The next day, his country announces that they have declared war on a neighboring country. The military is now coming town to town to look for able-bodied men to cause them to succumb them and make them conscribe them and bring them into the military. He comes to the house and he finds that his son has 2 broken legs and he's unable to fight. So they leave his son. The neighbor comes over and says, wow, what good luck. Your son had broken legs. He's not able to go and fight. The man says, good luck, bad luck. What do I know about these things? And on it goes. And so it is that we always see that we never know the full picture. We never really know what the evil will bring. We never really know what the result is that God has in mind. All we know is that Romans 8:28 tells us that God works all things together for his good. He has a plan. He has a reason. And for whatever reason, God has allowed in his sovereign design for these wicked things to be a part of your life for a season, for a day, to take your life for whatever purposes God has. We submit and lay our lives at the feet of a God who controls everything. This is not easy. I'm not telling you it's a simple thing. I'm not telling you that you should just run off and pretend that you don't have any emotion over your heartache and your difficulty. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying theologically, this is our answer to the problem of evil. We trust the sovereignty of God, who controls all things, who keeps Satan on a leash, and who never allows evil into our lives that are not for his perfect purposes.